Though plenty of video games have overcome spotty introductory hours to become fan favorites, it's not an ideal situation to be in. No developer wants to ship a game that leaves people telling their friends, "No, it's good, I promise, you've just got to get through the first 5 hours." I mean, there's only so much time in the day, especially when you spend 14 hours of it poring over VR Bongo. To avoid having to convince a player of a game's quality after a poor impression might have put them off, most studios double down in an attempt to grip us from the get-go. Often that means jumping straight into an explosive set piece a la Dead Space 2 or Uncharted 4, but other times it's a more considered, emotional gut punch of a pull the devs are going for. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 devastating video game openings that totally broke you. Number 10. Life is Strange 2. The original Life is Strange was an emotional rollercoaster, but the opening of the second installment eclipses anything found in that game in terms of sheer heartbreak. Picking up with a new protagonist, Sean, the intro finds him returning home to see his younger brother being bullied by their neighbor Brett. Getting into a fight with his brother's harasser, the skirmish ends with Sean accidentally pushing Brett to the ground, who cracks his head open on a rock. Panicking over the boy's lifeless body, a skittish police officer happens upon the scene and tells the brothers to put their hands in the air. Drawing his gun, Sean's father rushes out to stop the altercation, but the officer pulls the trigger and shoots him dead. It goes from zero to mass murder in mere seconds, with the turmoil of the shooting and the fight resulting in a supernatural explosion which then kills the cop. Everything comes out of nowhere and the game picks you up in a whirlwind of emotion and never really puts you back down. Number 9. Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 was a huge step up from BioWare's original RPG, and the sequel's opening didn't waste a single second in showing off just how much the team had upped the overall presentation. Catching up with Commander Shepard on board the Normandy, the ship is suddenly attacked and the crew is put into crisis mode as they attempt to scatter. As is the Captain way, Shepard stays until the very end to make sure everyone else is safe first, the good egg that he is. By then, though, all hope is lost for him, and he's sucked out of the broken ship and left afloat alone in the endless vacuum of space with his spacesuit malfunctioning. He dies in the opening minutes, not in a blaze of glory, but in a surprisingly ugly way, and all on his own. Of course, he doesn't stay dead for long, and fans did know this was coming, but the way the intro is directed captures the dread of the moment in such a palpable way, setting a precedent for just how much darker this sequel was going to be. Number 8. God of War. The opening hour of God of War 2018 functions to set a much more serious, somber tone than the one found in the previous trilogy. Taking its time to even show Kratos speaking as the grand score sets an underlying atmosphere of creeping dread in the background, it's methodical and deliberate, immediately sucking you into this strange new world. Following Kratos as he chops down a tree, the bandages on his arms hiding his scars threatening to fall away with each new swing, it turns out the Spartan is preparing to bury his wife. Along with his son, he travels back to his home, where his wife's corpse is laying under a blanket surrounded by effigies and tributes. It's an instantly affecting opening, which continues into a spectacular introduction to the new combat system as well, and one of the most visually striking boss fights the entire generation has seen so far. Number 7. Detention. A great little horror game from 2017, Detention's low-key brand of scares are rooted more in warping the player's own perception of reality than in gore and cheap jumps. The opening very quickly clues you in on this as well, as you play as Wei Chung-ting, a teen in a Taiwanese school who falls asleep in class and wakes up to find everyone gone and a bunch of weird stuff happening outside. The game offers a devilish mystery to unwrap as you explore the school, now taken over by a supernatural force, until you bump into another survivor, Fang Rei Shin, who's kind of positioned as a damsel in distress. That's all turned on its head though when Wei is suddenly caught by one of the monsters, killed, and has his corpse hung upside down on a stage for Rei to find. The introduction is already incredibly atmospheric, but this psycho-esque early twist makes you know not to trust anything. Number 6. Soma. Before Soma jumps into pure, unadulterated sci-fi terror underneath the oceans of a destroyed Earth, it ushers you through a present-day prologue where everything is surprisingly mundane. You pick up as Simon, the survivor of a car crash which killed his friend and gave him severe brain damage, which, it turns out, will eventually kill him too. His fate seems all but secured as doctors and scientists tell him there's nothing modern medicine can do for him. That is, until an experimental brain scan that's yet to be tested comes along as his last hope of survival. The idea is to upload his brain and digitally simulate a way to cure him of his ailments. It's already a pretty bleak opening, with Simon's condition treated very matter-of-factly, but once he sits down and the experiment begins proper, things get even more terrifying. The experiment goes wrong, obviously, and Simon blacks out, waking up hundreds of years in the future after an apocalyptic event has destroyed the world. Simon survived, but he probably wishes he hadn't. Number 5. The Walking Dead Season 2. It's not in The Walking Dead's nature to make players feel happy. From the opening episode of the very first season, Telltale's series has continued to subject players to one ridiculously bleak situation after the next, but they took that one step further with the opening Misery Guts episode of Season 2, which wiped the slate clean in a predictably heartbreaking way. After being left alone in the first game, Season 2 picks up with Clementine on the road with new guardians Omid and Krista, the latter of whom is heavily pregnant. This new family doesn't last long though, and after a quiet opening, Omid is shot and killed while running into a desperate survivor. Krista and Clem carry on dejected and in full-on survival mode for the next 16 months, before the two are separated once again after falling victim to a gang of scavengers. It's harsh and random, as most things are in The Walking Dead, and it leaves Clem alone once more at the lowest point of a 2-year stint that's all but broken her spirit completely. Number 4. Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. Wolfenstein: The New Colossus had big boots to fill. Not only did the 2014 reboot reinvigorate the classic franchise and make a character whose initials are literally BJ feel like a real 3-dimensional human being, but it also ended on a pretty self-contained note. The war wasn't over, but it seemed as though BJ was, blown to smithereens after finally completing his mission and taking out his arch-nemesis. It's a somber end, but there is hope. Hope which the opening minutes of The New Colossus stamps out in glorious fashion. Saved from the nuclear blast and in a coma for 5 months, the sequel picks up with BJ as a broken former hero who can barely raise his arm to fire a gun, never mind take on the entire Nazi army. Consequently, when his team is attacked and leader Caroline is taken hostage by the new main villain, the unspeakably evil Frau Engel, there's nothing BJ can do. Then the Nazi proceeds to chop off Caroline's head, and the shock of BJ being so broken and the hero of the Resistance herself being decapitated before the game has even properly begun harrowingly conveys the might of the Nazis' overwhelming power. Number 3. Mafia III. Mafia III isn't a great game, but it has one of the best openings of any game this generation. Putting you in the shoes of Lincoln Clare, Vietnam vet back in the States and looking to help out his family, the player is taken under the wing of local crime boss Sal. After a few jobs, you seem to be gaining his trust as you bring in more and more money for your brother and father. It seems like everything is too good to be true, and that's, well, because it is. To the surprise of nobody, Sal turns on Lincoln after questioning his loyalty, viciously killing his family and shooting him in the head. Assuming he's tied up all loose ends, he sets their house on fire, with Lincoln being pulled out to safety by a priest. Even though the writing was on the wall as soon as this relationship started, seriously, you don't even have had to have seen a crime film before to know this betrayal was imminent. The devastating scene in question is so unrelentingly horrible and violent that it still packs a punch. Number 2. Firewatch. Using an emotional montage to open a game, or any piece of media really, can be a risky move. While laying the drama on thick in the opening section can do wonders for establishing a specific tone and getting audiences emotionally invested in the story, it can also lack the weight it's supposed to carry if it's not executed right, feeling either manipulative or empty because the characters have just been introduced. Firewatch, thankfully, makes this kind of opening seem effortless. Intercut between small glimpses of protagonist Henry driving to his new job in the middle of nowhere is the backstory of why he's actually there in the first place, all told through text alone. Chronicling his relationship with his wife from their very first meeting until their parting, it's revealed that he's partially escaping the burden of looking after her, as she developed early onset dementia and both their lives spiraled out of control. What's brilliant is the player actually has a small amount of control over how this backstory plays out. They can control certain responses in specific situations, which not only gives them an active stake in this relationship, but makes it all the more devastating when prompts pop up that the player doesn't want to click on, but they're forced to anyway. Number 1. The Last of Us. Could it have been anything else? Offering players their only glimpse of the world before it's totally destroyed by an apocalypse, The Last of Us' opening subverts expectations immediately by putting you in the shoes of Sarah, Joel's daughter, who wakes up to find everything has gone to hell. From there, you're caught up in the chaos of the end of the world as regular people attempt to escape the populated areas and get the hell out of Dodge. It turns out the zombies aren't what Sarah and Joel need to be worried about though, and when they come across an armed government soldier attempting to contain the anarchy, they're viewed as a threat. He unleashes a flurry of bullets at the father and daughter, and although Joel puts his own body in the way, Sarah's still mortally wounded. The player can do nothing but watch as this young girl sputters on her own blood and succumbs to her wounds before the screen cuts to black. It's genuinely difficult to watch and establishes the kind of pain players can expect to be subjected to for the next 12 hours. So that's our list. I want to know down in the comments below if there are any entries I missed off here, or if there are any entries that you disagree with because you're a heartless monster. Either way, while you're there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more list news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, you've been watching WhatCulture, and I'll see you soon. Bye.